Welcome to Return on Security. I am Mike Privette, and I'm going to take you through a quick update about what happened in the cybersecurity market last month in April. But before I do that, let me tell you who I am, just because this is my very first video for Return on Security. So there may be some people who don't know me or know what I'm up to. But Return on Security is my publication where I try to capture the cybersecurity industry and the economics and the business that runs the industry. And to do that, I collect a bunch of data and I share that data out every week, mainly through my weekly newsletter with the name of Security Funded. So if you want to stay up to date on trends, specifically to the cybersecurity market only, that's where you should go. You sign up here. But we can also just talk through this market update. So imagine I'm collecting the data every week. I've been doing this for almost 3 years now. And so I've got a bunch of data that I like to roll up and then display in some different charts. And I do this so I can find a way to understand trends and to just make sure everyone's kind of aware of what's happening and what's affecting and what are the market moving things in the cybersecurity industry. So with that, I'm going to jump into it. This is the April 2024 update. I may go back and do previous month. I'm not determined yet. We'll see how well this video goes. All right. So make sure to subscribe to the weekly newsletter so you can get these every week. But as you'll see, I break these down to a couple different ways. So April 2024 was a very big month for the cybersecurity industry, 1.5 billion. That's the highest amount of money that has been raised this year to date for cybersecurity industry. Last month was also $1 billion, and that was the first month over $1 billion in 2024. And notably, that was the first month in about 6 months that we had even broken $1 billion. So security has been a very hot industry for the past several years. But then in 2023 and then 2022, really, where it started, everybody in tech had a bad time. Interest rates went through the roof. The cost of capital was very, very expensive. And a lot of companies who raised a lot of money in the years prior, 2021, 2020, 2019, they all had a very hard time. A lot of them were acquired by others. A lot of them are struggling and probably yet to be acquired. Some of them even shut down. But many of them just had to hunker down. And so there was a huge drop in the industry for about 8 months, which is unusual. That's not unusual for other sectors. It is unusual for cybersecurity because cybersecurity has always kind of historically risen up and to the right, if you are familiar with investing memes. But even cybersecurity is not infallible. It's a bit more recession proof. It's proven to be anyway over the past several years, but it's not infallible. So this number is pretty big, and it means that a lot of people are thinking we're so bad. So here's that's kind of the theme of this is that the trend is onward and upward. And there's also some really big M&A activities. So two big mergers, IBM, or two big acquisitions from IBM and Thoma Bravo. And then, as you can see, I capture everything from around the world as well. So I try to not just focus on U.S., even though that's where the majority of funding in the world comes to, U.S. and Israel. There's still a lot of other activity throughout the rest of the world. One call out, I'm doing new charts now, so all the charts are interactive. And so you can play around with them. So let's just look at these numbers. It was also RSA conference month, so this 1.5 billion, which is up 42% from the previous month, and it's probably largely due to the momentum effect that cybersecurity conference season has had. So for those who don't know, RSA, probably the largest cybersecurity conference in the world, most popular, the one in the US. But then shortly after that, Black Hat USA, and then there's a series of Black Hat events all around the world that I definitely recommend you go to if you've never been to one. But that is kind of the inaugural kickoff of the conference season, RSA. So a lot of companies time their funding announcements to then, or they time their M&A strategy to then, because they want to make a big splash. And you can't blame them because there's so much media noise or media hype going around it that you want to be able to rise above the noise with a very large transaction or a very, very cool announcement. But anyway, let's play with the data. I've got 2024 highlighted, but you can hover over any of these functions and see just what 2023 looked like. And I keep 2022 in here just because it's so different than the rest of the years. But that's also where things change. So if you look at June for 2022, you can see that's a big difference between the first, other 5 months of the year. And that's about where the bottom fell out for the tech industry as a whole, which included cybersecurity. So I'll keep this in here. I like to be able to track this over time. 2023 had still a little bit of a struggle, but had a few months that were pretty good. But overall, it was still pretty significantly less. So that's why I track this week over week, month over month, year over year, just so we can understand how our industry is evolving. So breaking down the actual insights. So a big part of what I do with return on security is I personally collect every company I can find, all the press releases, any kind of funding announcements, or any kind of even SEC filings. And then I will try my best to understand what they do, and then I will categorize them. So you'll see this here, 1.5 billion across the 58 events and 32 unique categories. So cybersecurity categories, obviously a very big thing. I only put one company in one category, even if you say you do a lot of stuff. That's good, but people need a way to compare. And so that was kind of my intent by putting one category for one company. About this past month, data security posture management and remote browser isolation were the two biggest by far. It's not uncommon to see remote browser isolation be extremely high on the funding amount. I don't think you can even do business in that category unless you raise more than 100 million every time you raise money. Don't ask me why. That's just how it has worked. And you can look across the small amount of players in that space, and almost all of them have raised at least $100 million. So that's something that's not surprising when you zoom out of the data. But data security posture management is an interesting one. It's a relatively new product category. It's DLP version 2 or version 3, whichever way you want to look at it. But it is an evolution of finding data, discovering data, classifying data, understanding data movements and workflows, and then also understanding how to protect it or who's using it, and then what access and things that people should have. So those made the big rounds. You can play with this data or these charts any way you want. You can also download the data. You can just click it right there and it just downloads a raw data for you. And so or you can even share it and it'll share this website, which is kind of fun. So remote browser isolation, that just came from one company. Which is pretty interesting. And that company is Island, and they've also raised 3 other rounds at or over 100 million. So they are far and away the category leader and the funding leader, which don't always correlate, right? Just because you've raised a ton of money doesn't mean you're winning the category or you're winning the customer base. That is the hope, obviously, with investment, that is that you put that level of money behind it, that you hope to get a return and take the whole market. But security is funny like that, and that it can really support a bunch of different players of the same type, because buyers or practitioners are heterogeneous. So they don't always buy the same. They don't think the same. They have very different need. Like you can't even compare like a tech company in the Bay Area to a bank on the East Coast of the US. Like they just have wildly different needs and processes and in the way they operate. So, but that's kind of the good opportunity about the cybersecurity industry is there's a chance. There's a chance for everybody. So for me, that just makes it kind of exciting. So then I break down the funding here on a couple different ways. So I'd like to play the categories again, but then you can also see the events and you can filter this any way you like security and compliance automation. Actually, that and security operations were tied for the most events. So a lot of people playing in this space today, especially with AI. You can't get away from that. Same with security operations, especially with AI. So you're going to see a lot of that. You'll see a lot more traction on some of these areas. And then you can also sort it by funding. Anywhere you see a $0, that just means it was undisclosed. That means like it was not publicly available, and I only try to capture what is publicly available, and I can validate from more than one source. So even if I somehow am privy to private data I don't share it, because if it's not public, I don't want to put it out there. So then this is a pretty long chart. This is all 58 or all 32 categories, and then with their events tied to it for a total of 58. So again, you can download the data or share it. And then I find this interesting. I like to break out things by the globe. So I know most of the funding typically goes by the US or Israel. You can't really think about Israel, or you can't really think about cybersecurity industry without thinking about Israel and the United States. Those are the two leaders most of the time. But there's still a lot around the world who are still contributing. And there are a lot of pockets in the world, because cybersecurity is a global issue. It's not just a capitalist issue. It's not just a democratic issue. It's in everybody. It's a societal issue. People everywhere around the world are trying to invest as much as they can to keep their citizens and their ways of life safe. And you need technology to do that. You need people to do that. So that's interesting to me, just to see like where are emerging areas coming out of. But same with this other charts. You can always zoom in. You can move around. You can see who has what, and by the events and by total. And this is another one you can share and download. And then on the merger and acquisition front, this is an interesting month for mergers and acquisitions. And honestly, it's been an interesting year so far. There's been a lot of higher profile M&A activity. If you look at volume, if you zoom back out and kind of look at the volume over 2022 and 2023 in terms of actual transactions, like kind of irrespective of the who's involved, the volume is still at a pretty similar pace. Like 2022 was higher because there was more funding in general and more transactions in general. 2023 still had a surprising amount of M&A, even though there was a pretty massive funding hit. And that was a lot of those early bets saying, we need to find a strategic buyer. We need to get Apple hired, or things like that. And more of that is happening in 2024, and then more of the late stage roll-ups are happening. And it's unlikely ones here too. So, HashiCorp getting acquired by IBM for $6.4 billion. I think, if I'm not mistaken, that's the third largest cybersecurity acquisition in history, with Splunk being acquired by Cisco being number one, and Juniper Networks being acquired by HPE number two. And then you've always got Thoma Bravo, the private equity play, always consistently buying private cybersecurity companies. So they have a massive portfolio. They've done a lot of transactions, and this is not uncommon in this space. There are a lot of private equity buyouts or take privates, or even handoffs between private equities. So just those two transactions alone made up 80% of the M&A activity, which, is not really a surprise when you see those numbers. And then also in M&A activity, I like to break down the exact companies. So here's each company, who the acquiring entity or the acquired company, and the category they're in, and then how much price, how much the transaction was listed at. And again, the $0 means that it wasn't publicly disclosed. But if you zoom out on these transactions, yes, you see the high flying profiles of HashiCorp and Darktrace, but by and large, most acquisitions are services-based businesses. Most of them are professional services companies buying other professional services companies, or MSPs and MSSPs, or managed security services provider, buying other companies or buying a professional services company. So they're typically a lot smaller. I still like to represent them though, because even though they're not product companies, you can't exclude them from the cybersecurity industry, because it doesn't work without products and services. So you have to cover both if you want to have a kind of real picture of the industry. And my goal is to kind of capture the world, if that makes sense. So that's why you see with this. Again, you can play with these. You can shift these however you like, up and down. So that's just fun to play with. And again, you can always get the data. And then for the monthly reports, I've actually started highlighting some of my own work. Like if I post a longer form piece, which I do probably once a month at this point, then you can always go down. This one's been a great one. my friend Rami McCarthy and I did a look back on the entire history of the RSA Innovation Sandbox competition and what it means from like an economic perspective and what it meant for a security outcome or founder perspective. And it's pretty fun. It was just a lot of fun with numbers, and so it's definitely worth the read. So I recommend that. And then this top rate read section is I take a collection from all of the weekly reports. If you missed anything in April, here's all 5 issues you can go back and check out. And then I just pull out a couple great reads that I've found personally to be the best. I always try to bring stuff every week that I think is good and really valuable to people. But then some of them are just more engaging than others. So these are the collections of what I write. And then I just kind of go through like, how the data is collected. So if anyone's curious about how I capture this or what the figures mean, everything's in USD. And I try to pull everything from publicly available sources when I can. And that's it. That's the first issue. I hope you like this version of it. You can always go read it on your own on returnsecurity.com. But please let me know what you think. Drop a comment if I should do more of these videos, or if I ramble too much, or anything. All feedback is welcome at this point. So thanks. See you next time.